to item number 11, which is the LINZ Smart City Program funding paper.
I might actually say something in this one.
Yes, you may. Please introduce the paper.
If I can find it.
And your fellow presenters.
So I'd like to introduce Hayden Reid. He's the LINZ Program Director, but Hayden is also the ex-Strategic Asset Manager from Wellington City Council. And I'd also like to introduce Teresa McCullum, who is the Program Manager for Smart Cities under the Commit workstream of Great for Christchurch. So what we're asking for here is basically approve the match funding of $330,000 for the long-term plan sensing from the long-term plan sensing city budget to support the LINZ program of Christchurch proof of concept projects. The $330,000 in funding from LINZ and $200,000 from NEC as contributions towards the Christchurch Smart City program, and authorise the Mayor to sign the Smart City Collaboration Protocol with NEC. Now, basically, this is for a proof of concept over a defined period, and the end of that proof of concept is to develop a strategy for the city going forward around smart cities. So what I'll do is I'll quickly pass over to Teresa to give a bit of background of what the LINZ Smart City program is about.
Okay, so the LINZ Smart City program is really having one view between Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch that allows us to trial sensors and ways of working with our other agencies. And ultimately, the business case will be a deliverable there that will be going towards the concept of a smart nation. And Hayden, would you like to give a little bit more of a brief?
Sure. I guess there's an opportunity. We're in New Zealand, we're only a little place really. We have some geospatial challenges, of course, but it makes a lot of sense with some of the new technologies and approaching these things to take a bit more of a global view. So what we do in one place should be able to be replicated, particularly in the public sector space, seamlessly into another space. So the whole idea of this innovation project is really to look at the way that you might approach the new technologies around helping run cities, and when we do that, to make sure that all of us folk can share our learnings across the cities and in the future in the towns across New Zealand in the rural space at what is ultimately least cost and best benefit. It's a public value question, so this is what this is about, is exploring that, the technologies, do they work, how do we do that, how do we work together, and ultimately how do we provide what we all want to provide is safe, livable, enjoyable community spaces.
I think that one of the things that came up in the paper for me was that the topics of interest that were identified in a workshop last year, so in 3.14, it talks about improving understanding to improve decision-making, improving analytics to improve decision-making, improving engagement to create the right outcomes, and talks about interactive opportunities and participative democracy, catalysing economic development opportunities as well. And it seems to me that, because I've looked at the London City website, and they have a dashboard where anyone in London can go online and just see what's happening with traffic movements, with air quality, with, I've got to imagine the air quality in Beijing at the moment. It's got all of those things that you actually can know about what's going on in your city and what to avoid and what not to avoid. And I kind of think that there must be enormous opportunities for us as a city as we rebuild to embed some of this technology, which is why we put money on budget in the first place for that Sensing City project. So in terms of where the money comes from out of the budget, I think you've targeted the right spot. But to collaborate with Wellington and Auckland in order to get the best bangs for bucks for New Zealand Inc., I think it really works for me on another level as well. Oh, okay, well that wasn't meant to be a question, I suppose. Ellie?
Just thinking of a practical application of something that's happened in the last 12 hours, so the amount of rain that's fallen, for example, and on Facebook and networks last night, people in our ward were talking about whether there was rain in Flockton and what the situation was. Is there a potential for people to go online who live in that area to see if the pumps are going and if there's flooding?
Short answer is absolutely yes.
Right,
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah, Yanni, Pauline, Vicky.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is basically to enable us to have more information, but I still don't quite see how it actually changes the decision-making around dealing with some of the issues. So if you took a very topical issue, which would be the particulates in Woolston, for example, which are, you know, have historically been at very high levels, or the air quality or the water quality, even when we have a huge number of complaints and lots of evidence that shows there's a problem, we still don't actually get any solutions. So what's the difference in this in terms of finding solutions? How will it enable us to find better solutions or actual solutions to the problems?
So I think the fact that, as Leanne spoke to, with the very visible dashboard, we start to engage in a way that's very meaningful, both to the public and to councillors and to the executive members of Christchurch City Council. So when it's as simple as seeing how certain things happening in our city impact on the particulate level, not only can we say there is a problem, but we can start to see what is impacting or what is causing that problem. So we start to see trends in whatever it might be, environmental factors. It might be certain cloud, and certain cloud patterns create more of a particular problem. It could be, I mean, I don't know. I'm just giving an example.
Wind is probably
correct.
likely, yeah.
And so once you know these sorts of things are happening, you can start to say, this is a problem. So as a member of the public, unless I have a technical understanding of the science, I may not understand what the issue is with the particulates. But if I can see it in a very meaningful, easy, simple way.
I could probably give you a bit more of a bricks and mortar answer, if you like, because I'm an infrastructure guy. So some folk overseas are tracking vehicles through these kind of technologies for the first time, real time. If you're able to do that and you have incidences of events on the network, planned or unplanned, application software can inform motorists, literally at their dashboards, around routes to take, decisions of whether they're going to jump on a train or jump in the car or even walk in certain circumstances. So the cities are actually able to function and respond, and the folk in the cities, the communities that obviously make up the cities, can make real-time decisions with information that is in front of them. Otherwise, you can't.
So is there going to be any relationship between this work and the consenting, so that when people get consent with conditions, or when we think about granting certain land use activities, it's tied into information that better gives an effect? Because that's been one of the challenges with the community, is that, you know, the tests have always been so high, and we've got this issue over in, obviously, Living Earth in Bromley. And we've put electronic monitoring in, but it still hasn't really satisfied the concern.
So we haven't looked at that specifically. Again, we're asking for funding to start the project. I mean, that will have to come into it. If there are monitoring systems in place, that's put in place through this project, this program, then yes, that can link into the enforcement side of things for resource consents and air emittance, for example. So yes, that can be linked to it. To answer your first question, Yanni, you know, with information that we can gather from these types of sensors, I can't sit there and say this would be the solution to Woolston, but I think it holds us accountable. Yeah, because the information is much more open and public. We're not debating it behind closed doors. It could be available on a dashboard, like was said. We would become much more accountable to come up with a solution as governors and as executives and as the council.
But this would be open source data, so others would be encouraged to come up with solutions as well.
Correct.
So,
That's right.
what I've seen overseas is that you know, young smart people who know how to do things with even cell phones that I can't even do, they create apps that people, you know, will buy online, you know, so they create a little business opportunity out of, you know, open
Free
source data. Yeah.
That's right.
Pauline, Vicky, Glenn?
Oh, thank you. Mine was just a question. I've got two actually, just around the timeline. So you've got your open source, your concept period, which will end at the end of 2016. So during that time, I assume you've got some trials up and running, that's right. So after that, all going well, it gets a nod, is it kind of all steam ahead and bung in a whole pile more, or what's the
plan?
process after that?
So the process is to develop that strategy going forward for the city before the pilot or before the proof of concept finishes. And that strategy is something that will be approved by council, and we'll have a governance process around it as well.
Right. And my second question is around, I'm particularly interested in the idea of being able to get some information about our water quality in our rivers. What level of detail would we expect about the different types of pollutants, particularly the metals and the invisible ones? Is that going to go right down to that? Or?
I can help answer that if you like. Quite a lot of work is being done in areas like the Land and Water Forum, managing water within quantity and quality limits. So the cities in the background with regional councils in a few places are looking at measuring all of those elements that we hold near and dear, things like E. coli, heavy metals, and a whole raft of other ones. The technology is actually already here. It's about how you constructively build a monitoring environment that allows you to inform what you want to know in regards to the particular water body or asset that you're trying to understand. So it's really about crafting what's specific for the specific purpose. So what will happen in Wellington, going to the beaches, might be slightly different for the streams around Christchurch. But ultimately, you get to make those sorts of decisions when you come to decide what specific outcomes you want for whatever thing you want on the ground.
That's great, thank you.
Vicky?
Just in terms of, I'm just really keen that we get on and do this, because I appreciate that we can get amazing data very quickly. And I've seen this in other cities, and it creates all sorts of information, and we don't even yet know the outcomes of that. And as long as it's open source data, I'm good with that. So what I'm intrigued by, and what I got the impression by in the discussion the other day, was that this was going to actually result in things happening, the sort of the backbone thing, and so that we've got all that information. But I'm just hearing about this strategy, which I'm hoping is a 10-minute exercise, and then we sort of get on and do it.
So 10 minutes might be ambitious. However, we will be leveraging off strategies that are already existing in Wellington and Auckland. Hayden helped develop it, so
2 weeks was that?
2 weeks.
But on 3.17, it talks about testing building technologies, built form, vehicle pedestrian interactions, as well as streetscape impacts. ECAN have also expressed an interest in using the infrastructure to pursue joint projects on water quality. I mean, this is real, you know, it's real stuff that will make a difference to the city.
And as soon as we can get this approved, if you approve it, we will...
No pressure.
Pressure? We will actually start in earnestly talking with ECAN about funding and what they can do in the space as well.
Excellent, excellent.
In that case, I'd like to move
Glenn and then Paul.
I said I'd like to move it.
Thank you.
You can move it.
Yeah, I'll
Yes.
second it.
Thank you. Just got a few
And
questions here. So with this, information here, will it enable us to, for instance, anticipate when the next water main might burst in Bailey Avenue, or will it show me a better way through the labyrinth of roadworks and
the lotto numbers, you mean?
and Parkins? And what will it do to the Canada geese pooing on the pontoons at Kerr's Reach? So really tell me, please, how it will actually add value to all of us, to our ratepayer dollar.
Can I give an example that is already happening in Wellington? So I've got it in twos. Give it two, and two over here. In Cuba Mall, they have installed. They've got what they call a living lab, and they have audio sensor as well as a visual camera sensor. And their audio sensor has learned to tell broken glass, screaming, and they have an agreement with the other agencies, police, emergency services, agencies for homeless people and things like that, to be able to respond when they have an event starting to happen. They also have shape recognition, where the camera now can identify what appears to be a beggar. When they see someone interacting with that beggar, they confirm that it is a beggar, and then they can have, once again, agencies going and looking at that vulnerable person and helping them. It's really exciting, and it's happening now. And it means that we are now anticipating things that are happening in our city. So if we think about our Riccarton bus exchange and our central bus exchange, we've got an ability now to start to intervene in events as they begin to occur rather than after they have occurred, which makes it a much safer environment.
Just a supplementary.
I've heard some issues. I've heard some examples around upping and downing lighting, making it cool, making it warm. You know, like depending on what's going on in the environment.
Right.
Yeah. If you want people to disperse, it's like a nightclub at 3 o'clock in the morning. I recall from the old days. You know, they turn the lights on full and everyone will go home.
Correct.
You can do that by sensing technology as well.
Yeah, just red flag's gone up there when you've talked about those who are homeless or begging. So confirm who's a beggar. I mean, someone could be busking, sitting on the ground.
Yeah,
Who's a beggar?
No, well, they actually train the software. So
Machine learning algorithms can identify the difference.
Yeah.
It can tell the technology is seriously...
So just an example, when they first started this, they had a success rate of 1 out of every 50 events were successfully identified as a begging event. In 3 weeks' time, the software was able to identify 100% as begging events. This is the sort of learning that we're talking about in the software. You just need to take time, have smart people on the case, which we have got, and the software will respond as we need it to.
Begging events, homeless events, so we're reducing subjects to objects. I mean,
this is so much more than that.
Yeah, it's just an example.
It's just an example.
It was an example because, I mean, and what they were saying was that in terms of intervening with somebody who's clearly in a vulnerable situation, well, that's
correct.
That's a positive. That's not a negative.
Yeah.
And it's not about going and, you know, having someone arrested. It's about having someone from a social agency going to check out what's going on.
That's right. And in this particular situation with Wellington City Council, they have a stakeholder group of, what was it, Hayden, 105 odd stakeholder groups, including groups like LINZ and those type of social agencies. So where that occurs, they can involve those types of agencies to help these people.
software will put people into categories. No, it'll identify people who are begging or homeless.
Well, that's why I use the lighting one as an example. You can also use it for people being assaulted. You know, like the software can recognise someone being attacked.
Correct.
So it can instantly notify police. And if in a period of 3 weeks, the identification process can go from 1 in 50 to 100% accurate, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, I mean, maybe people need to have a little bit of an update of where technology is developing and how quickly this software is capable of identifying what it's looking at. That's why I'd never play chess against a computer these days. Artificial intelligence, I'm afraid, is...
Yeah, and just Councillor East just mentioned the tagging problem. They have sensors now that have sort of sniffer abilities and can identify when the chemicals that are involved in spray paint and things like that are occurring. And so once again, and that's in their troubled spots, they've got troubled spots around. So once again, I saw it, I was there yesterday, I saw it on the dashboards. It's exciting, and it's just, we need to be part of this. There is a whole world out there, and it's not about punitive responses, it's about safer communities and a healthier environment for Canterbury. Honestly, it is just tick, tick, tick for me.
Yeah, no, just for me too.
I think what Councillor Livingston is trying to point out is that there could be risks to things like human rights, privacy, things like that. So is anyone assessing the risk?
I can talk about that. I was just waiting, I promise. So this is a really good point that you're bringing up because it's really important. and other councils and other organisations are looking at this and been talking about this for a long time. So what the project's specifically doing and what you'd expect is front-loading all of these projects with privacy impact statements. So we are on a one-to-one dialogue with the Privacy Commissioner, and they review these on our behalf to make sure that everybody is kept safe from a privacy point of view. The project's actually got a very unusual and very important other role almost in the space by itself, is that not only is it an opportunity where we can collect information and understandings from the folk who build the technologies but people who actually, going through processes. We've had lots of questions from our community in Wellington about this very issue. But what all this information is doing is going back into a specific piece of work that's been done within the project to go back through to the Privacy Commission, saying this is the kind of stuff that's being considered, being talked about, because actually the privacy laws in New Zealand are being looked at right now, the legislation around this, because the technologies are literally 5 or 10 years ahead of where our legislative frameworks are. So this is a nice way, as long as we keep each all safe, and that's the Commissioner's helping us to do that, then we can take the learnings from this project, because it's a proof of concept, and that these projects are the only way actually that you can actually learn this stuff is actually by doing it, and then as long as you keep people safe through the process, and that's how we've chosen to do that.
Yep. All right. Well, I've got a mover and a seconder, Paul and Ali. Is there any discussion? Yanni?
Thank you. I think the timing of this is really interesting, and it's a little bit unfortunate that we haven't been able to do this sooner as a city. Out of the earthquake, I think the public actually overwhelmingly want us to have a more sustainable city, and sadly we've lost so much opportunity through the infrastructure repairs that have already been done, the building that's already been done, to actually think about how we actually become a sustainable city. I did note when the young students from Kashmir actually came and talked to us, one of the things that was raised was just actually having good measures of sustainability, and I've always thought we should have a sustainability clock in the square that actually measured what's happening in terms of the earthquake recovery and rebuild, because every time buildings are torn down, we actually lose energy, and we had this discussion around saving the town hall, that actually the cost to the environment of that decision was quite significant, and yet probably people don't actually quite realise the embedded energy that goes into these buildings. So I think this is exciting, but I think we do need to think about the risks, and I think the risks for me are twofold. One is around that privacy and those basic human rights issues, and I think we need to have some really clear protocols around how it's used. What we've seen, I think, in the past sometimes is that certain groups in our society tend to bear the brunt of those sorts of privacy and human rights abuses, and so I think if this can be more open, actually hopefully provides a fairer and more transparent system of monitoring. For example, the cameras that we have in the central city that the police currently have access to, why not make those open to everyone in the city? So if we can be more open and transparent, I would support this. And the other risk is that actually just getting the data isn't actually enough. We have time and time again seen areas, I think on the paper today, 375 complaints around stock and waterways, for example. And we've got numerous examples through complaint systems where people actually provide feedback around things not working or things being a problem. So I think it's really important that this does get tied into the consenting, the monitoring and the enforcement of those sorts of activities that do have negative impacts on our environment. Air quality, water quality are two that have already been mentioned. And I think that hopefully, because one of the challenges has been that through the consenting process that people are always told that you have to provide all this evidence and it has to meet all these certain standards. So I think the challenge in this project is to actually have robust enough systems in place that can lead to better decision making. And at the moment, I think we've got a long way to go, and I would just hate to see it become just a way of collecting information without any ability to be used as evidence to actually support making decisions that actually stop the harm that's currently being done to our local communities. So thank you for the work that you're doing on this. I think it is exciting, although it's long overdue, and it's a shame we haven't been able to do it earlier. And I support this going forward, but I do think regular report back on what's happening and engagement with communities is also a really important feature of it.
Yep. Glenn.
Thank you. I'm going to need some convincing over this potential social impacts over this. I think you heard how appalled I was at what I heard before. If we're talking about those begging, those homeless, these are subjects, not objects, and people are infinitely more complex and subtle, and so is life, than the best technology. And so I will need a lot of reassurance to get my vote over the line for this. I can see the advantages, but you have to say how much value will it bring to our ratepayer dollar over what we already have and the information we already have upon which to base our decision making. So I welcome other contributions to this debate, and I hope someone can address and provide reassurance over the potential social impact that we're looking at.
Paul?
Maybe I can help there, Glenn. Just from what I've heard is that this is the wall at the end of the cliff rather than the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. They actually can attend to issues as they're happening as opposed to when they're finished. And I think that's the key part. So from me, I see this as actually a way of actually looking after a community in real time as opposed to post whatever actually happens. And I also see it as a measure of making sure that the authorities in charge of certain areas of our community, like the air quality, like the water quality, it keeps them accountable. It makes them accountable because it's open sourced. Anybody can see this information and can act upon it. And I think Yanni's point about making sure that we can use this data to actually keep that accountability is actually really, really important. So to me, I see this as actually more opportunity than not.
Vicky, Pauline, Phil.
I think this is something that you can actually apply retrospectively. The issue of sensors, which is largely what this is around the world, has been debated. I was at conferences on it about 8 or 9 years ago in Singapore. There are billions of them around the world, and what you can do is provide information in real time, so that if an air pollution event is about to happen, you can warn people to take action. Entire building complexes have been built such that there are sensors within the buildings, and you can add them retrospectively, so that people can actually have entire complexes of buildings that are so much more energy efficient than what we're currently building. The rain monitor that Ali mentioned, the whole thing of open source data, and that's why I'm so insistent that it is open source, means that there is an array of opportunities for real-time innovation in all sorts of things. One of the things I would think it was most important in, and an area of high priority for us, is water quality of our rivers, of what's going on the bottom of our quarries. I'd love to have sensors down there, just in case the monitoring organisations are not doing their job, just so we know that there is no danger, even from existing operations, of aquifer incursion. All sorts of things that I think provide safety and opportunity for a city. One of the things we have to do as a city is attract talent to the city, and the opportunities to use open source data is going to be one of those things. We're already looking at things that go way, way beyond this and which use this. For example, in Adelaide in November, when I was there, they closed off the state highway for driverless cars, which require sensors. But the opportunities for driverless cars in terms of human safety, because it's almost always the human factor at a car that causes the problem, is just incredible. You saw at the Consumer Electronics Show driverless drones, passenger drones, and they were bringing them out to New Zealand, they said on the BBC, to show them here. There are just so many disruptive technologies coming at us that to say no to information derived in this sort of way would be so unusual and weird that it just would not be the sort of Christchurch that we're looking at, where we're trying to promote the city as anything is possible. And open source data means that a lot more is possible.
Might be the modern version of King Canute. Hold back the tide. Pauline?
And that's well said, Vicky. The possibilities are endless, really, with this. And it is the way that the world is going. It's happening everywhere. And we do not want to lag behind in technology. We want to be a leading edge in technology. But I'm wondering if, to address the risks that I tend to agree with Glenn, that there are risks, could we put something in there, please, to note that that you're collaborating with the Privacy Commission to address any potential human rights or privacy risks? And I would feel more comfortable if that was noted. Because it's not just collecting the data, it's how it's used. And so, you know, it's great if it's used to grow our knowledge and develop technologies and share in safety, etc. But when it begins to be used as a bit of a punitive measure, and it will be, you talked about graffiti and crime, so it's about keeping that in a balance so that it doesn't become the main priority of its use. And I know it's not what it's intended to be, but it's about addressing those potential risks. So whether we make a number 4...
Yeah, number 4 is to note that the Privacy Commissioner will be consulted on the projects. Will that do the trick, or...?
Yeah, I'd be happy with that.
No, can I just say, I think you're putting the cart before the horse here. I mean, this is about developing a strategy to understand how we can gather data through sensors.
Well, hang on, it's not your turn to speak, and there is I've got a speaking order, so I can put you on that list if you want, but we're looking for an addition to the staff recommendations, so that just noting that the Privacy Commissioner will be consulted on the projects, because there are proof of concept projects which are actual things, not strategies. So, Phil?
Look, I'm also excited about the potential of this. I think it's really good we've had this debate, because it's clear around people's privacy we do need safeguards. We're already using sensors. You know, for example, CTOC, it's running in the city. People's cell phones trigger it off, and it gives us useful information. But you see, I think that I certainly support point 4 here, and I see it really a bit like electricity. Okay, when it came in, people were pretty nervous about it. There's a positive and a negative, and it's how we use it wisely and safely that we have to get to. So, and like the advantages, I think, in terms of our city's problems are huge. If we take, as part of transport, if you take the parking issues, people driving around looking for parks. In fact, there are parks available, and that could very quickly tell people where the park is and reduce that congestion problem. So, and the potential, as Vicky has said, in terms of our environmental standards, measuring those, getting information, and playing our part in terms of the contribution and using all this information wisely. So I'm going to support it, and especially pleased to see the note regarding consultation with the Privacy Commissioner.
Yeah, Rev. All right, I'll put the motion.
Can I just check? Pauline actually indicated the Human Rights Commissioner as well, I guess on a case-by-case basis, but...
Yes, yeah.
Is it possible just to add that?
The Human Rights Commissioner is consulted if the Privacy Commissioner raises issues, but I mean, I don't. As a matter of course, you wouldn't be consulting the Human Rights Commissioner on every piece of every project.
Well, we'd be looking at the Wellington protocols, because you made those as an example. So, I mean, it's not about recreating something, it's looking at what other cities are doing and taking the best and moving forward. It's just, yeah.
But, I mean, well, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner has been consulted on projects in other areas, so...
if the Privacy Commissioner had any concerns, he or she would then consult with human rights. It would be a step. I think that covers it.
Yeah. All right, so I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming in.
Problems?
That's it.